My fiancé's family tried to sabotage my business and our wedding, but I had the last laugh. I'm a 32-year-old male, and my fiancée, Sarah, is 30. We've been together for 5 years, engaged for 1, and was set to be married in 6 months. This story, however, starts long before our engagement and involves a level of familial manipulation and greed that I honestly wouldn't have believed if I hadn't lived through it. I come from a relatively modest background. My parents are hardworking, but we never had a lot of disposable income. Sarah, on the other hand, comes from what I can only describe as old money. Her father, Richard, owns a very successful chain of high-end car dealerships across the state. Her mother, Eleanor, is a socialite who spends her days organizing charity events and managing their various properties. Sarah herself is a fantastic person, intelligent, kind, and incredibly supportive. She's always been uncomfortable with the pretentiousness of her family, and that's one of the things I love most about her. She's grounded despite her upbringing. My own career path has been a bit different. I'm a software engineer by trade, and about 7 years ago, I started a side project developing a niche application for car dealerships. It wasn't anything revolutionary at first, just a specialized inventory management system with some predictive analytics for sales forecasting. I poured all my free time and savings into it. For the first few years, it was slow going. I was working full-time, coding late into the night, and often felt like I was banging my head against a wall. But I believed in my product. When I met Sarah, my company, Autoflow Solutions, was still very small, operating out of my spare bedroom. I had a few small dealerships as clients, mostly independent ones, and was barely breaking even. Sarah was incredibly encouraging from the start. She'd listen to my frustrations, offer suggestions, and even help me proofread marketing materials. She saw the potential in Autoflow Solutions, even when it felt like no one else did. Her family, however, was a different story. From the moment I was introduced, I felt like I was being scrutinized under a microscope. Richard, her father, was cordial but clearly dismissive. He'd make comments about how I was ambitious for someone starting from scratch and constantly asked about my long-term financial stability. Eleanor, her mother, was worse. She'd make thinly veiled remarks about my upbringing, my lack of a trust fund, and how I probably didn't understand the nuances of their world. Sarah's older brother, Mark, 35, was the worst of them all. Mark worked for his father, managing several of the family dealerships, and saw himself as the heir apparent to the entire empire. He was arrogant, entitled, and openly hostile towards me. He'd often mock my little software company and tell Sarah she could do so much better than someone like me. Sarah, to her credit, always defended me. She'd push back against their snide comments and make it clear that she loved me and my ambitions. This, of course, only fueled Mark's animosity. He saw me as a threat, not just to Sarah's financial future, which he believed should be intertwined with theirs, but also, I suspect, to his own sense of superiority. Over the next few years, Autoflow Solutions started to take off. I secured a major investment from a venture capitalist firm, hired a small team, and expanded my client base significantly. My software was genuinely good, and it was filling a real need in the market. By the time Sarah and I got engaged, Autoflow Solutions was no longer a little software company. We had a growing roster of clients, were consistently profitable, and I was making a very comfortable living. I was able to buy a beautiful house, and I was financially secure enough to provide Sarah with the life she deserved, one that wasn't reliant on her family's wealth. My success, however, only intensified the resentment from Sarah's family, particularly Mark. Richard, while still somewhat condescending, started to show a grudging respect, recognizing the money I was making. Eleanor still treated me like an outsider but tempered her comments. Mark, though, saw my success as a personal affront. He started actively trying to poach my employees, offering ridiculous salaries and perks. He tried to lure away my clients by bad-mouthing my software and making false claims about my company's stability. Thankfully, my employees were loyal, and my clients knew the value of my product. The real drama began when we started planning the wedding. Sarah, wanting to be fair, suggested we split the costs. Her parents, however, insisted on paying for everything. They said it was their duty and that they wanted to give Sarah the wedding of her dreams. Sarah was hesitant, knowing it would give them more control, but I convinced her it might be a way for them to finally accept me. I was wrong. Eleanor immediately took over the wedding planning, making every decision without consulting Sarah or me. The guest list became an endless parade of her mother's social connections, many of whom Sarah barely knew. The venue, the caterers, the band, everything was chosen to impress Eleanor's friends, not to reflect our tastes. Sarah was becoming increasingly frustrated, but she kept trying to find a compromise. I, meanwhile, was focused on my business, which was expanding rapidly. We were developing a new module for AutoFlow Solutions, a predictive maintenance system that could save dealerships millions in repair costs, and I was deep in the coding and testing phase. One evening, about 4 months before the wedding, Sarah came home distraught. She'd had a huge fight with her mother. Eleanor had, without consulting anyone, sent out invitations to over 300 people, most of whom were her acquaintances. Sarah had wanted a smaller, more intimate wedding. When Sarah tried to explain this, Eleanor apparently told her that she was being ungrateful and that this was how things were done in their circle. The final straw was when Eleanor announced that Mark would be giving a speech at the reception, a speech that Sarah knew would be filled with thinly veiled insults directed at me. This was the turning point. Sarah was done. She told me she couldn't go through with a wedding that felt more like a showcase for her mother than a celebration of our love. I completely agreed. We decided to have a small, private ceremony, just us and our immediate families, and then a larger, more casual reception for our friends later. We tried to explain this to Eleanor and Richard. They were furious. Eleanor accused Sarah of being selfish and ruining her reputation. Richard threatened to cut Sarah off financially, even though Sarah had her own successful career as a marketing executive and didn't need their money. Then came the really insidious part. Around the same time, I started noticing strange glitches in the new predictive maintenance module of AutoFlow Solutions. Small errors, unexpected crashes, data corruption, things that shouldn't have been happening. My team and I worked tirelessly to track down the source, but it was incredibly subtle. It felt like someone was deliberately trying to sabotage the software, but we couldn't find any external hacks. One afternoon, I received an anonymous email. It contained a series of screenshots and internal memos from Sarah's father's company, Richard's Auto Group. The content of the email was shocking. It detailed a plan, orchestrated by Mark, to intentionally disrupt my software. Mark had apparently hired a disgruntled former employee of mine, a junior developer I had fired for incompetence a year prior, to act as an informant and plant malicious code within the new module. The plan was to make it seem like my software was unreliable, to damage my reputation, and to ultimately drive my clients away, especially the bigger ones that Richard's Auto Group was hoping to poach with their own, inferior, in-house system that Mark was developing. The emails even included discussions about how this would teach that upstart a lesson and put him back in his place before the wedding. It was clear they intended to humiliate me and force Sarah to reconsider our marriage. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just corporate espionage. It was a personal attack, a deliberate attempt to destroy my livelihood and our relationship. I immediately called my lead developer and showed him the email. He was horrified. We traced the code mentioned in the screenshots and found it hidden deep within the module, designed to activate randomly and cause intermittent failures. It was brilliant in its maliciousness, almost impossible to detect without knowing exactly what you were looking for. I confronted Sarah with the evidence. She was devastated. She cried for hours, feeling betrayed by her own family. She couldn't believe her brother and father would go to such lengths. She apologized profusely, even though she had nothing to apologize for. I assured her that I didn't blame her, but that we needed to act. The first thing we did was secure our systems. My team worked around the clock to remove the malicious code and reinforce our cybersecurity. Then, I contacted my lawyer. He was appalled by the evidence and advised me to pursue legal action immediately. However, I had a different idea. I wanted to hit them where it hurt the most, their reputation and their wallets. I scheduled a meeting with Richard, Eleanor, and Mark. Sarah came with me, her face grim. I laid out all the evidence on the conference table, the anonymous email, the screenshots, the internal memos, and even the detailed technical analysis of the malicious code. Mark's face went white. Richard tried to bluster, denying everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. Eleanor looked genuinely shocked, probably because she hadn't been directly involved in this particular scheme, but she quickly became defensive. "This is outrageous," Richard fumed. "You're accusing us of corporate sabotage? This is slander." "The evidence speaks for itself, Richard," I said calmly. "And I have more. I have recordings of Mark trying to poach my employees, bad-mouthing my company. I have affidavits from former clients of yours who can attest to your aggressive and unethical business practices. And I have a very good lawyer who is eager to take this to court." Mark tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. Let me be clear. I have every intention of filing a lawsuit against Richard's Auto Group for corporate espionage, defamation, and attempted destruction of intellectual property. The damages I will be seeking will be in the tens of millions, and I will make sure the media knows every single detail. Your reputation, Richard, will be in tatters. Your precious empire will crumble. Eleanor gasped. Sarah was silent, watching her family crumble under the weight of their own greed. Richard's face was a mixture of fear and rage. What do you want? He snarled. First, I said, I want a public, written apology from Mark and from Richard's Auto Group, admitting to the sabotage and retracting all the false statements made about my company. This apology will be published in every major newspaper in the state and on your company's website for no less than 6 months. Preposterous, Mark exclaimed. Secondly, I continued, ignoring him, I want a formal, binding agreement that neither Mark nor anyone associated with Richard's Auto Group will ever attempt to contact my employees, clients, or business partners again, or in any way interfere with AutoFlow Solutions. A non-compete clause that explicitly details a multi-million-dollar penalty for any breach. That's outrageous, Eleanor cried. Thirdly, I said, looking directly at Richard, you will publicly endorse AutoFlow Solutions to all your dealerships and encourage them to adopt our software. You will also provide a substantial investment in AutoFlow Solutions, effectively becoming a major stakeholder, but with no voting rights or influence over company operations. This will be a public gesture of your faith in our product. Richard's jaw dropped. You want me to invest in your company after all this? Consider it reparations, I replied, and a way to save your family's reputation. Because if this goes to court, you'll lose everything. The silence in the room was deafening. Mark looked utterly defeated. Eleanor was on the verge of tears. Richard, for the first time, looked truly scared. And finally, I said, turning to Sarah, Sarah and I will be having a private wedding, as we originally planned. You are welcome to attend as our guests, but there will be no lavish spectacle, no grand pronouncements, and absolutely no interference from either of you in our lives going forward. If you accept these terms, I will drop the lawsuit. It took several days of intense negotiations, facilitated by our respective lawyers, but eventually, they agreed to my terms. The fear of public exposure and the colossal financial hit a lawsuit would entail was enough to break their resistance. Mark issued a humiliating public apology, which was published everywhere. Richard's Auto Group made a significant, highly publicized investment in AutoFlow Solutions, and Richard himself made a statement praising our software and urging other dealerships to adopt it. The non-compete agreement was ironclad. 2 months later, Sarah and I had the most beautiful, intimate wedding imaginable. It was just us, our parents. My parents were overjoyed, Sarah's parents were subdued but polite, and a few close friends. Mark was there, looking utterly miserable, but he kept his mouth shut. Eleanor was surprisingly quiet, almost apologetic. I think she finally understood the depth of her son's and husband's treachery, and how close they had come to destroying everything. After the wedding, we held a larger, casual reception for all our friends. It was a joyous occasion, filled with laughter and love. Sarah's parents were there, acting like normal human beings for once. Richard even made a genuinely kind speech, though I suspect it was more out of obligation than sincerity. AutoFlow Solutions, meanwhile, has absolutely exploded. The public endorsement from Richard's Auto Group, coupled with their significant investment, gave us an unparalleled boost in credibility and resources. We've expanded our team, launched new products, and are now one of the leading software providers in the automotive industry. Richard's dealerships are now some of our biggest clients, and it's truly satisfying to know that their success is now, in a small way, tied to mine. Mark, on the other hand, was effectively sidelined within the family business. He still works there, but his authority has been greatly diminished and is constantly under the watchful eye of his father. I hear through the grapevine that he's absolutely miserable, and that his attempts to develop his own in-house software have been a spectacular failure. Poetic justice, I suppose. Sarah and I are happier than ever. Our relationship survived the storm, and if anything, it's stronger for it. We learned that we can face anything together, and that our love is more resilient than any amount of family drama or corporate sabotage. It's a strange feeling, being connected to her family through business now, but I've learned to navigate it with a steely resolve. I got my wedding, my wife, and my business thriving, all while making her manipulative family pay for their greed. Sometimes, The quiet revenge is the sweetest.